to share with you the experience we've had in Mexico regarding funding mechanisms and how to increase mobilization of resources for protected areas. I decided not to bring the regular PowerPoint, just share with you some photographs. And I'll share with you some thoughts about the way we normally sell protected areas and if we're doing the right thing or not. So the context that we work with in Mexico is we have at the moment 176 protected areas. This is equivalent to 25 million hectares of a country. I mean, it's about 12% of the terrestrial land we have in the country and 1.7% of marine waters, marine territory in the country. We have a very strong pressure at the moment as a national agenda for rural development and national growth. We have a new government. They've been there for 2 years now, and they have a strong commitment to improve the livelihoods and economic situation of people, both urban and rural, but especially rural people in the country, where most poverty is found. At the moment, we have a portfolio of 100 of different projects with international funding of around $100 million, over $100 million. We have our portfolio, our national budget, it's at least 40% now is based on subsidies for people living within the protected areas. In Mexico, the land is owned by local communities and it's not owned by the government. So one of the key mechanisms for CONAM to work with people is through our subsidy program, promoting sustainable development projects and productive alternatives for people. So the challenge we have in Mexico and obviously in all your countries is how do we increase the resource mobilization and investments for protected areas and for conservation in the country. We had a very similar process like Peru mentioned of assessing our financial gap. After COP7, I think it was COP7, CBD COP7, we started doing our funding gap, assessing where are we standing now and how much do we need. And we came up with a huge number similar to the Peruvian number, which is very difficult to face. I mean, our funding gap is like, I don't know, $300 million per year. And that's, I mean, if you show up with any policymaker in Mexico and you say that we need this amount of money, no one will give it to us. After assessing our funding gap, we developed financial strategies. And we realized that we have basically 3 sources of funding. I insist, very similar to what the Peru developed. So the first one is how do we increase federal funding, government funding for protected areas? And this is probably one of the most trickiest one. We haven't been that successful in communicating and convincing both decision makers and legislators, who are the ones who vote and approve budget every year, why do they need to invest? The government needs to invest more in protected areas. The second strategy we have is bringing money from other sectors. How do we increase investments from the agricultural sector, the social development sector? We have a commission for indigenous peoples. So how do we increase investments from all of these sectors? And the third one is obviously how do we increase investments and funding from international cooperation and private sector. So the new challenge we have, and obviously we've had it since 2010, is Aichi Target 11. So the funding gap assessment we did was for the amount of protected areas we had at the moment. But now all of us have this Aichi target in front of us, and that will even create more challenges in terms of funding for countries. Mexico our president decided that we will reach Target 11 not by 2020, but by 2018, 2 years before we're meant to achieve it, because his administration will end in 2018. So our pressure for building and increasing resources is even higher. But we realized that we have to change the way we sell protected areas. We tend to use images like this to say why it's relevant to preserve biodiversity. But we realize that this is not a selling point anymore. We haven't been able to reach those people, the non-converted people who do not believe conservation is relevant. We have not been able to reach them through beautiful images like this. or even taking them to protected areas. We've done this with legislators, and they have a good time. They enjoy their trip over there, and then when they go back, they go into each political party's agendas, and they forget about protected areas. We've been working on thinking really, how do we make them more sexier, or how do we bring visibility to all the goods and services they provide? And we realize that conservation is not anymore about species and ecosystems. Conservation should be more about people's livelihoods and security, climate change mitigation and adaptation, development and poverty alleviation, provision of ecosystem services, water in particular. So how do we bring other agendas into, or how do we bring protected areas into the huge development agenda that all countries have? And how do we better communicate the relevance of investing in the natural capital of each country in order to position why protected areas are relevant? And I know, you obviously share the same challenges we have. We have, at the moment, a project with the GIZ on valuation of ecosystem services. And the reason why we put forward this project, and it's now currently being developed, and Celia Pigron is here, who's one of the responsible for this project, is how do we not only make it visible, make the ecosystem services visible for decision makers, but also how do we mainstream these services into the economy at the national level and at the regional level? And how do we communicate and turn protected areas into opportunities for development, especially for local communities, but also at the national level? So we've learned up until now that if you really want to increase the resources you're investing in protected areas, you need to work at different levels. The first step is to know why do you need more money. It's not about needing more money. It's knowing why and what are you going to spend the money in, and be very strategic on that. I was 2 weeks ago in Korea at COP12, and I followed and was part of the negotiations for the resource mobilization target. And they were, countries were obsessed in saying developed countries should double how much they're investing in for conservation and for the Aichi targets. And developed countries were saying, okay, if you want me to double what I'm investing now, everyone should also mobilize resources at domestic level. So we turned up with an agreed text, but at the end of the day, it's not only about needing more money, it's about knowing why and what do you need the money for. And if you are prepared to present to your legislators, donors, or policymakers why protected areas are relevant, you'll be in a better position to increase mobilization of resources and more funding for your country.